Welcome to the wide world of trees. I'm your host, Gene Bosler, and I'm very pleased to have as my guest Dr. Tom Smiley. Dr. Smiley is an arboricultural researcher at the R.A. Bartlett Research Laboratory in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me, Dr.
Happy to
Smiley.
do it, Gene.
One of the things I want to ask you is what are the nuts and bolts of soil nutrition and how it helps, how good soil nutrition and a good quality growing medium helps reduce a tree or woody perennial's susceptibility to pest insects and diseases?
There's a lot to that. Certainly we know that trees need nutrients and water from the soil, so if we have limitations in soil volume or soil quality, the roots are not going to be able to take up as much of those materials as they may need to. And that could lead to deficiencies in the foliage. As far as insects go, we know that there are some groups of insects, especially the sucking insects, that are attracted to yellow foliage, so that color change could then attract these insects. We know that plants are more susceptible to some boring insects when they are stressed. The primary stress there is water stress, but that can go hand in glove with nutrient stress. So for pine beetles, for other borers, we may have more troubles if the soil quality is not good.
All right, so let's talk about borers. Do both moisture extremes increase susceptibility to boring insects?
Yes, it certainly does, either too wet or too dry. Some interesting research that our entomologist, Dr. Donald Booth, is working with is the generation of alcohols within the root system that is a stress reaction. And what they're finding is that the alcohols do a lot to attract the boring insects, especially the pines.
Is that olfactory?
I believe it is with the wood borers. Right, they smell that alcohol and it brings them in from some distance.
Now, you think my limited understanding of the pine bark beetle, which I guess is a type of borer, I know they tend to be fairly superficial and not go much deeper than the sapwood or the inner bark. Is that right?
Right. They don't go terribly deep, but what they do is bring in a fungus that then plugs the vessels and leads to water deficits.
Now, my understanding, again, limited understanding, is that loss of turgor pressure in the vascular system of the tree makes a pine bark beetle attack more successful than a tree that has good turgor pressure?
Right. A lot of that has to do with the resins in the wood. So if the pine bark beetle or other beetles attack pines and there's a lot of moisture in there, they can produce the resins to pitch those insects out, or at least that's what we hope will happen. But if they're water stressed, then they're not going to be producing those resins as well, so they lose that defense mechanism.
And just to make sure I remember high school science class right, turgor pressure was the experiment we did with that really tiny straw, smaller than a soda straw, and we watched the water climb up the inside of it. Is that turgor pressure?
That would probably be more like capillary pressure. The turgor pressure we usually think of in the leaves, keeping those leaf cells fully hydrated.
Keeping an evapotranspirational pull in the entire vascular system of the tree.
Yes.
Okay, so if I have a soil medium that is rich in organic content, but perhaps over-irrigated, gets too much moisture, say 3 times a week, the kind of irrigation schedule that one might apply to a lawn,
yes,
without much thought to how that might affect the root system. That means that there's water occupying most of the pores. Yes. I know in arboriculture we talk in terms of micropores and macropores. So if water is occupying the pores in the soil, regardless of its organic content, there's going to be root stress. How does that work?
Right. It works in a couple of ways. One of the major ones is actually the lack of movement of carbon dioxide out of the root system. So the carbon dioxide can build up around the roots, which then can damage the roots. Also, obviously, a lack of oxygen getting in, but it's probably actually more the concentration of carbon dioxide than the lack of oxygen that's really stressing them.
Okay, so let's go back to that for a second. Some of my listeners are more environmentalists and less arborists. And just to be clear, the root system is letting off carbon dioxide the same way, let's see, the leaves are taking in carbon dioxide and emitting breathable oxygen.
Yes.
They're what we're calling a sequestering carbon.
Yes.
But the root system emits it?
Absolutely right. So the sugars come down to the roots from the leaves, and they use that sugar as energy to produce more root growth, and during that, the energy is consumed, and the byproduct of that is the carbon dioxide being given off, and it has to disperse out from those roots.
And the inability for dispersal to happen is how root systems become more susceptible to anaerobic pathogens that are residing in the soil?
Right. So if you're watering 3 times a week, in especially clay soil, you're probably going to be greatly limiting that oxygen exchange, that oxygen movement down to the root systems. And under those conditions, you get a lot of different things happening. You get this alcohol production, which can attract the borers up above, and Phytophthora root rot becomes a real problem under those conditions. So we're more susceptible then to the root rotting fungi coming in.
Phytophthora root rot, is it pretty well a safe assumption that some Phytophthora root rotting pathogens are more or less ubiquitous in the soil, just looking for an opportunity to attack a distressed root system?
Yes, I think that's very true, that we do have a lot of Phytophthora spores out there, and then when conditions are right, when the host is stressed, when there's a lot of water, it's a water mold type fungus. It's actually not a fungus, but it's...
Is it an alga?
It's somewhere in between.
Okay.
So, but anyways, it moves through water. It has to have that water to move. So if we have those conditions, high water levels, the zoospores can move into the root system, can attack the root system, and it's going to be stressed, so it's susceptible to attack.
Okay. I guess, does that type of irrigation schedule, frequent shallow waterings, again, designed with the lawn in mind, retard the rate at which soil biology builds up? Again, assuming I have a relatively high organic content in my soil, which is another ideal situation, considering the vast majority of the soil samples I pull from a typical residential or commercial property in an urban or suburban landscape setting are super low in organic matter. Let's just go back to assuming that the organic content is high, so the requisite building blocks are present for a vibrant soil biology. That soil biology buildup or rhizospheric life cycle is retarded by this constant moisture?
Absolutely, because we're not getting that oxygen to move down, we're not getting that carbon dioxide out, and those microbes need to do that. They need to take in oxygen, they need to respire the carbon dioxide. So if those gases aren't moving because it's too wet, then you're going to virtually wipe out that microorganism growth that you have. And it's going to be replaced instead by the anaerobic fungi, and that's going to give you the sewage type smell when you dig into the soil, and certainly problems with the tree root system, unless you have a tree that's adapted to those conditions, a bald cypress or some other swamp species that can live there.
So just to be clear, we're not depleting the soil of biology. We're just depleting the soil of the kind of biology that does benefit to the plants that are trying to grow in that medium.
That's right. Now you may reduce overall numbers a little bit, but basically you're changing the microbes that are growing there. When you have an energy-rich environment with the organic matter, you're going to have something growing there. It's just a matter of what.
All right. Why is it important to have soil biology? Is it because regardless of the amount of organic content in the soil, I might put lots of humus, I might put even a tea, or I might increase by various methods, incorporation with an air spade, rototilling. That's basically when you plant a tomato garden, when you rototill, you're aerating and incorporating organic matter so that you have a successful vegetable garden, right? So what I'm trying to do is get the soil biology built up so that they can consume the organic content, so that they can break down the nutrients trapped therein into their inorganic state so that they're available to the root. Is that right?
Absolutely right. That's right. You want those microbes in there helping with that breakdown of organic matter to mineralize, basically, the nutrients in it so the tree can take those up. And then you have some other microbes, depending on where you are and what you have in your native soil. You have nitrogen-fixing bacteria that could be killed with too much water, with those anaerobic conditions. So you have other good guys. The mycorrhizae that will help extend the efficacy of the root system by helping take up phosphorus and water. So there are a lot of things that can be damaged with excess water.
When we think of soil biology, we're not just thinking of microorganisms. We're thinking about a whole array of organisms, from single-celled bacteria all the way to these large earthworms, right?
Earthworms, crayfish-type organisms, insects. Yeah, there are a lot of going on down there.
And does all organic matter in the soil have to go from wood or leaf to wood chip to mulch to compost to humus? In humus is like the smallest particulate of organic matter before the last stage at which it's broken down to its mineral composition.
Right, and it breaks down into the humic and fluvic acid type components before it goes any further. But yeah, that's basically the progression in the urban environment. Now, there's another thing that does occur both in the urban environment and out in nature, and that is the breakdown of root systems. And that's one of the reasons we get that very deep prairie soil with the tall prairie grasses, is when we have the root systems growing very deep into the soil. They die, and that then produces organic matter. So trees do the same thing, but they probably don't generate as much organic matter in the soil as a prairie grass root system.
Prairie grass roots, tall grasses have deeper root systems that penetrate the soil to a greater depth, and when they break down, they invite soil biology to greater depths.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We get organic matter incorporated into greater depth, deeper depths, with those deeper root systems that, again, turning over more rapidly than a tree root system is turning over.
Well, which makes sense, which is, the world over, including Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, we're talking about converting grasslands into agricultural use with much greater success and yield per acre than when we convert forest.
That's right. And that's why in the United States, we've got this Midwest that has these very deep, rich soils, and they were, in general, prairie soils before they were agricultural soils.
So does all life on Earth depend on about 6 inches of soil, like the adage goes?
It sure does. It's like the outer layer of an onion, just that very thin layer, if you're looking at it from the perspective of Earth, and that's probably a way overestimation of the thickness.
Okay, and this is sort of ties into soil biology a little bit. If I'm standing let's just take the Archips semiforana oak leaf roller caterpillar that attacks, say, live oaks, but it attacks many other plants. I've seen them on Mexican sycamore, I've seen them on American sycamore, I've seen them on Shumard oak, red oak, all manner of oak. But 2 live oaks side by side with interlacing canopies, one of which is like 90%, or everybody uses the term 90%, but it sure seems to be, a good, at least 4/5, if not 9/10 defoliated by the caterpillar. And this tree right next to it is virtually untouched. Is there any explanation for why all other things, apparently at least superficially appearing to be equal, why is one denuded by a caterpillar while the other is not?
Well, I don't know the research on that one, but in general, I think the answer would be the genetics, and those oaks are probably generated from seed, so there's a wide diversity, well, within a limited range, of course, on the genetics, and that would certainly have an impact. It may have more toxic elements within the leaf system, or toxic to that leaf roller, that may be kicking in.
Asking you this question just reminded me of a study I read where a certain type of leaf cutter ant, Atta texana, I think it's called, this species has a history of attacking the exact same tree year after year, ignoring all other trees around it. And I wonder if there's a certain similar motivation, kind of like salmon returning to their breeding grounds. Do a caterpillar go to the same tree because that's the tree they go to? I wonder if there are any studies that support that.
Yeah, I don't know that one on the caterpillars. I think they do move around a bit.
Is there something about the soil nutrition that translates all the way to the surface of the leaf that makes it more or less susceptible to the aforementioned sucking insects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a number of different things. Certainly there are the chemicals that are produced within the plant that can repel some insects or be toxic to insects. And then there's the water movement, the nutrition. Some insects are looking for higher nutrition leaves and others prefer lower. So there are all those things that come into account there.
Yeah, aren't there some pest insects where we're discouraged to apply high nitrogen fertilizers?
Absolutely, yeah, especially with the sucking insects, where fertilization can actually increase the number of insects. But you have to take a step back though and look at overall tree health. Often, even with those insects that reproduce more quickly on high nitrogen leaves, that overall the health of the tree may exceed the poor health tree. So a tree with good health may actually look better and be doing better with higher levels of insects on them than the tree with the poor nutrition.
So it's important to look at a bunch of different factors.
Yeah. It's not just nutrition.
It's a relatively accurate field observation to observe that the trees that are in rapid decline have a multiplicity of factors dogpiling upon them.
Right. They call it a decline syndrome or a decline spiral, where when things start going bad, they get worse and worse very quickly, which is important for us to know as tree care professionals, that if we can get in there early and hopefully stop this decline spiral, that's the time to do it. The earlier the better. When it's only got a few leaves left, the chance of it recovering are not very good.
I often feel when I'm trying to turn a tree back, which is, every day, that I need to stop the decline spiral before getting the darn thing to start climbing back up the escalator.
Exactly.
And
right.
that those are two different steps, and to expect a magic turnaround without having arrested the decline first is unrealistic. And so that's, I think, when dealing with clients, of course, explaining to clients what needs to be done to a sick tree is different from explaining to a patient what needs to be done to him or her. That's always important to point out. Look, let's arrest the decline
Yeah.
Let's get there first before we start talking about restoration.
That's right. And it may be stopping the insect that's defoliating it or the wood borers that are attacking it. And then after we've got that stabilized, we can start working on the soil by doing root invigoration or mulching or fertilization or whatever it needs, looking at the irrigation, the water needs, and then addressing the whole tree series of things that may need to be done.
But it'd be a pretty safe declarative statement to say something like, what a tree wants is a healthy growing medium.
Yes.
And it's accurate to say that a tree with a healthy growing medium and an adequate soil volume for an organism of its size in maturity is more likely to be, I don't want to say resistant because I don't think that would be physiologically correct.
Right. Yeah, I think more tolerant.
Insusceptible, less susceptible.
Less susceptible, more tolerant, right.
To you name it, fill in the blank.
Yep.
I guess one last question, really, because I just can't stop beating this dead horse. If a tree under distress might close its stomates to conserve moisture?
Right, especially if we're talking midsummer, full sun, high temperatures, low soil moistures.
Other stress factors?
Yeah, or maybe just natural things.
Or just that.
Right, and then the stomates would tend to close during the day. Maybe it depends how bad the stress is. Maybe starting at 10 in the morning,
right,
and then maybe opening up at midnight or 1 or something like that. Again, it depends on the water situation.
And so a sucking insect would be more attracted to a tree whose stomates are closed in an effort to conserve moisture than to a tree that's operating on all 8 cylinders. Let's say 2 trees next to each other, one was closing its stomates because of a stress response.
That's probably a better question.
Wild conjecture, right?
Yeah.
that might be a conjecture. I've heard, I think Dr. Glenn Parsival once say that there's an ultraviolet spectrum that trees that are trying to conserve moisture put out that's slightly different signature that some insects see. I would assume that those are more likely to be sucking insects rather than chewing insects or rasping, lapping insects.
I would think so, and certainly Dr. Percival looks a lot at the chlorophyll fluorescence, the level of chlorophyll within the plant, and he is certainly well up on those topics.
How useful is it to do a comparison between foliar nutrient analysis and soil nutrient analysis? I've done a few,
right,
but the reports I get are very different. So
they're always different, yeah. And certainly the soil analysis tells you what's available in the soil. It tells you the pH, so that helps with availability. But the plant, the tree sees it differently. We don't have the correlation data like they have in agriculture for every plant species because we work with so many different trees that the lab analyses don't always give us the exact interpretation of the soil numbers, because obviously if they're different, then we're not analyzing it correctly. And the problem there is just there are so many different tree species that it's hard to come up with those exact numbers.
And you would consider yourself to be a world traveler?
I've been around a little bit.
The places that you've been, is it pretty well universal that the urban-suburban landscape setting is safe to say it's inhospitable for trees?
Yeah, it sure is. I think that's a given universal.
And the challenges are pretty well.
The challenges are pretty
uniform.
much the same here, Europe, Asia, Australia. Anyone who's dealing with trees in an urban area has a good job security because there are a lot of problems out there.
I've been speaking with Dr. Tom Smiley of the R.A. Bartlett Research Laboratory. We've been talking about soils, plant susceptibility to diseases and pest insects. We didn't really talk about mites. Dr. Smiley, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you, Gene.
And this is Gene. Thank you for tuning in. And again, if you have any questions or comments, leave a comment in the comment section. Send me an email. And if you haven't been to the home site for this podcast, it's www.wideworldoftrees.com. Thank you.